Hello everyone, welcome back. This is the Oasis Digital curriculum sessions where we talk about Angular and Angular adjacent technologies. We take a look at some code and we just talk about what's going on in the space of front-end technology. And so this week we've got David Moore joining us remotely.
Hello.
David, hello. Elvis, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Elvis Mamutovic. I work at Oasis Digital as a developer and a graphic designer.
Bill Odom. I'm Bill Odom.
John Bauer.
Jack Balbus, I've been on before.
And then myself, Paul Spears. So you can find our Twitter handles attached to the description down below in the video. And then, of course, you can always like and subscribe if you want to see more of our shenanigans. So, as always, these sessions are unscripted, where we just dig into whatever the current issues are in our curriculum, and we just tackle them together and figure out how to best teach this stuff. So, on the last session, we talked about adding a couple of steps and kind of rewiring how we go about teaching observable error recovery and error reporting. And so we had decided that we were going to split those out, and then we started reworking the error recovery step, and that's where we left off. And so we were going to pick up right where we left off today. So John, you had some questions about where we'd left off. Do you remember what those were?
It was just a question about whether we're worried about consistency here. I think we did talk about this in the last meeting. We've got the two methods. One's commented out, and the other is not. The first one kind of does all the functionality in line there, and the second one calls out to another method, which, for us reading the code, it's obvious, oh, well, it's just calling out to a method to do the same thing, or to do a similar thing, sorry. I was wondering whether the students might get confused by, well, this one is calling out to another method, and that's why it recovers.
Yeah, that actually has been an issue in one of my classes, and I was teaching with another Angular Bootcamp instructor, Andrew, who clarified the point that I was glossing over, because I had not thought about the fact that it's behind a function or another method boundary would be confusing. It's the fact that you've got that separate observable happening, not the fact that you're calling a separate function. So Andrew pointed out that the important bit is the different observable, not the fact that you're calling a function.
So you're saying more like just drop that right in line.
Either that, or push both of them out to methods. I'm not sure that I like either of them, but we have to remember. So for context, we're not only teaching to people who are new to Angular, but they might be new to TypeScript and JavaScript and everything.
So I'm already liking that. I don't know why we never arrived at that particular iteration last time, but I'm already liking that. Instead you comment out one extra line down here, and you don't have the extra layer of indirection at all.
Well, could you comment out the bad technique, the 27 and 28, and let's actually write the good technique the way that we would. I know we wouldn't normally do it in line like this anyway because we like to split it out, but I want to actually get it formatted the way it would look if we were actually doing it in line, just to see how this all feels.
I'm missing.
And Paul, could you share your screen so I can see it as well?
Wow, David, you're so much more polite than I am. I would have been screaming from the very first moment.
I only realized a moment ago that you were actually looking at code rather than just talking about it. So.
Occasionally I've been known to dabble in the authoring of code. All right, what am I doing wrong here?
Thank you.
This has got...
You're missing... No.
I think you're missing a, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So that needs to stick around either way.
Now you should be able to auto-format, right? No?
There it is.
I don't like that, but...
So I like this better because it makes it really obvious that the only difference between these two things is the placement of that catch error operator. I wonder if it would be a little cleaner, like the only way that I could think of to make this a little bit more simple and cleaner would be to encapsulate the this.http.get in a method, because that part is the part that's like least relevant to what's going on here. And so if we could just
Do that.
extract that to a method and then
Yeah, but
use
then
that
we'd
in
be
both
doing
places.
this dot. It'd say a few characters, but that's about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do want to make it very clear the difference between these two small blocks of code, because this subtle but very important difference is the entire point of this example. I'm a little bit worried that like Prettier might be getting in our way here a bit, because the formatting of these two little blocks of code is critical.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
just thinking, I was about to say that Prettier is great for formatting your code, but not when the point of your code is to emphasize differences.
So
Yeah.
I would like to make them look as much alike as possible,
Well, and
except for the thing that is actually different between the two of them.
taking
Yeah.
that http.get out to another function might. Well, no, because you'd still need the arrow function there, unless you take the extract the whole arrow function, but that might get even more confusing.
Yeah, I don't want to lose. We're trying to
Yeah.
eliminate function boundaries. We're trying to make it like this block of code and this block of code you can compare like nearly side by side.
Right.
I wonder how
Well-
similar you can actually make them, considering that it's not just that the catch error is in a different place, like we've got a whole nother pipe in here,
Right.
which is messing things up.
Well,
And
yeah.
like trying to make things exactly the same.
I mean,
Can
exactly the same except for the part where they're not.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is something we want to throw in, but can we tell Prettier to ignore this file?
You could.
For the moment, why don't we tell Prettier to ignore this file, and then we can try things and see where we land, and see how important it might be to tell Prettier to lay off.
Rather than accidentally committing that, just turn off Prettier for the time being.
There we go.
And now, if
I think it said that those are yeah.
yeah, it really means it.
It wasn't lying. It needs a reload.
You know, it's kind of like when Windows says you have to restart after installing an application. Sometimes you believe it, sometimes you don't. Alright, so yeah, now it's not doing any formatting. It's going to let us do whatever we want.
All right, so Jack, where were you going with what you were?
I was just trying to think about, like, we want to make as little difference as possible between 27 and 28 and then 31 and 32, right? But the problem is that, like, 27 and 28 kind of very neatly resolve into two separate lines, whereas 31 and 32 is really actually one giant line.
The real differentiator between these is that paren right there.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if we just put 31 and 32 on one line, because that is the big difference, right? Is that it is all one expression.
Where are you
As a-
going to say, John?
I don't. Not ready. I had something. No, I don't know.
Well, we want to make it clear that the pipe in the proper example is associated with the HTTP GET. So what if we took the GET and moved it down a line, and then indented the pipe one level under that? No, I mean the whole this.http.get.
I was thinking move the whole.
Yeah, I don't love any of this. And I mean, I'm okay with the formatting being a little bit weird for the example if it's clear what we're trying to convey. Because we can talk in class that, you know, in a real piece of code, we would extract all this. We wouldn't be doing these raw gets from here anyway. But the point of this is to actually make it clear what's happening.
Maybe we go back to what Jack suggested and take that http.get and move that to its own method, so that we're calling something like get employees instead of this.http.get open bracket employee.
All right, yeah, let's try it.
Yeah, and Bill, the 35 through 37 right now, where it's on the this.htp on a separate line, I know from experience, people learning TypeScript will get really confused about like when to use curly braces, when not to use curly braces, and the implicit return if you're not using curly braces.
Yeah.
And so having it on a second line might confuse them. Something to think about when teaching this section and arrow functions in general, if people need to learn them.
You're gonna turn Prettier back on and see if that.
Yeah.
Those are just your enabled extensions.
What about installed but disabled? Oh, here they are. They do have
Yeah.
a section.
Oh, poor TS Lint.
Wah, wah. Well, that's interesting. It did not need a restart to come back to life. And that's actually exactly how it wanted to format it right there.
Really?
So that's what we'd be looking at with a prettier format with that indirection.
I might like that better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can also make the point that, 3132, that actually feels like it should be right. Look how straight line that is. Everything's it's like, obviously this is the correct, and it's seductively wrong.
Oh, you need to comment out 38 as well.
That's a good description. Seductively wrong.
But yeah, like in this actually with the paren hanging way down here that you don't have at all, and the other one helps block in that capturing group of like, oh wait a second, here we're switch mapping to a thing that begins and ends here and here.
Yeah.
So that paren really helps, that bottom one.
Yeah. I think I like that.
Alright, have
Do we
we beaten this one up?
Do we want fetch employees to be a function or just a property?
You're going to need it to be, well,
It depends on what you want
Yeah.
to do. They're
What do
two
you-
different
Well,
things.
in
If
this
it's called
case-
fetch, then it's a function.
For this being a polling based idea, we actually do want a fresh observable each time.
You're right.
all right, so before we put this one to bed, somebody walk through, like, the very short version of teaching this.
Alright, so
So this is the state we would come in, right? Like, right here.
right. Alright, so speed running through this, we show that much like previous steps, it goes out, fetches some employees, displays them on the screen. This time, however, we have it on a timer, that way it refreshes it every 2 seconds. And then we can show that when you go offline, it fails to make the fetch, we no longer see the employees, but ideally we'd like to be able to come back online and see, okay, great, we've now restored our functionality. However, instead, it just stops trying altogether. After that error, there's been no additional fetches made. So then we walked the code and show them how, okay, yeah, we saw this briefly before we went and saw the actual running app, where we showed how we have this fancy new catch error thing that we just learned about, but when applied here, it apparently doesn't actually do what we expected it to do. Because after we tried to recover, it didn't actually do anything. Instead, it just stopped. So we walk them through the explanation of how this puts it into a finalized state whenever you catch an error at this level, and so the interval itself becomes stopped as a result. And then we comment out, we say, but all is not lost. With the right granularity, we can go offline, see an error, we can go, and we see even in the error state it continues to try. And when we come back on, it picks it back up and resumes and continues. And so then we can walk them through showing how this catch error is actually on the internal fetch employees observable, as opposed to being attached to the outer pipeline that is part of the interval. So here we were catching the error on the interval, here we're catching interval on the inner HTTP request.
Yeah, it all makes sense. I gotta be honest, I still don't really. I feel like there's another thing or set of things that we could do that would make this clearer. And I'm beginning to wonder if it's if maybe we're commenting out the wrong level of thing. Like the outer observable almost gets lost in this example. The interval 2000 with the pipe, because the catch error, the line 32 catch error, that's associated with the pipeline on the interval. Whereas what we really want to say is it should be associated with the fetch employees observable. But it's really easy to lose that in the
What if
example that we've got it structured.
What if we take off 34 through 38, move that pipe catch error into the fetch employees function and comment it out? I'm just tossing this out there,
So
thinking out
say it
loud.
again.
So we're not going to have two methods in here. We're just going to have lines 31 and 32.
Ooh, yeah, I really like that.
We
Actually,
move the pipe catch
yeah.
error into the fetch employees, but it's commented out. And what we show is you'll end up commenting out line 34 and uncommenting 26 to
Yeah,
make
I like
it work.
where this is
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
Make sure you get rid of this semicolon
Well,
on the end of 25 and put it under 26. Under 26.
So this goes away entirely.
Yeah.
Alright, so we start doing this, and then we swap 26 and 33,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then delete the semicolon.
yeah, this is a much better.
Yeah, I'm
Example.
feeling this better so far.
Because this is how you would want to do it anyway. I was thinking about it after looking at the finished result, and we ended up with a pipe inside a pipe, which I would never actually write. I would always extract
Exactly.
it to a method.
Now we might still run afoul of the, the function boundary must be the thing that's doing the work for us. So we need to, one, make sure in class we explain this is not about the function.
We have the function here either way.
No, I know, and I'm saying that still could be confusing because it's still a piece
It
I would
could be.
like
There's-
to get
Yeah.
rid of, but I don't think we can without making something else harder to understand.
The instructor is just going to have to know part of how to explain this.
Try one thing, Paul.
Mhm.
Go ahead and take the semicolon off of the end of line 25 and put it underneath, like, new line 27. I know, don't love it,
Oh.
but I mean,
Prettier.
you
put
can
it
actually.
back.
Yeah, Prettier.
Yeah.
Does the right thing.
Well, yeah, I know. Again, Prettier
I know,
in this
I know.
case may actually be
I
in the
know.
way of understanding and making it harder to teach this. So we could leave the semicolon off entirely. Get our inner Kent C. Dodds on.
You could, I don't like this, but I'm going to say it anyway.
That's what brainstorming's about.
You could can you put dot pipe on the end of it, and then put make it an empty dot pipe,
Yeah, I see where you're going with this.
Well,
So put a,
put that
a
there,
space in between
a space,
the
or
parens,
no,
or an enter.
empty
Recurrent
line.
character
No.
To the
Nope.
left
No.
by one character from where you were.
So
inside the parens.
inside
Yeah.
of the
Yes,
And
and
then
then you
move that
comment
up
out
there.
the function in the
Gotcha.
middle.
And then remove the pipe thing.
I think
Yeah.
Prettier's going to put this back together too.
Well,
I
it
don't know.
can't now though, can it? Ooh,
Oh,
It can
What?
do that.
wowzers! That's a bug, is what that is.
Yeah, because that actually broke the semantics.
Did it?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, it's executing an empty statement right here, isn't it?
No, I mean it's putting it on the
What was before?
dot pipe.
Yeah, it was
It's the
doing
same
that
thing.
before, but it is not what we want. whether it's correct or not.
I actually don't know that you can do dot pipe empty.
Yeah, I don't either.
I've run into this in an actual application
Sure.
where I needed to conditionally run an operator, and
I mean, I don't see VS Code whining about it. So apparently the first argument is optional.
Yeah.
What are you about to do? Oh, you're going where I was going to go next, which is like, hey, I'd still like to be able to see this stuff happening in the console.
There you go.
I mean, if you give me my tab back, then you're going to have to do the console table. Why didn't it work?
Oh, because you.
Oh,
gave it
you
a
got
string.
the string argument at the beginning. I think it ought to be able to do a caption. That would
Oh,
be
absolutely,
really
yeah.
helpful.
And now this is the Prettier version, and going from broken to not is a single
Do we
control.
have
Oh
You
no!
need a comma.
You got a comma.
Gotta have a comma.
But we're okay
Wait.
with trailing commas in our
Yeah.
arguments, aren't we? Well, I know that in our projects we turned it on. It's Prettier
Yeah,
to
if
take
we
it away.
haven't, we could have that argument next.
What's this thing going out here for? Something isn't right.
You're missing the catch error. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be. So if you comment that out, is it okay with the trailing comma?
Let me make sure I actually got it working before I go in. Okay. And then
Is it? Yeah.
console, meanwhile, is racking up our offline errors. Coming back online. Works. Alright, so this is working, and it is. So it takes it off. But we can do it right here, because then after you do that and you hit Control S, it actually did not put it back on the previous line. But it's working in either state, and then you had to make a change either way as a developer. So if you wanted to, you could.
I like. Yeah.
I'm feeling better about this overall, and I don't actually have Prettier automatically doing anything when I'm teaching, so I'm totally cool with it. Go ahead and let's make sure that commenting out the other end of this doesn't do anything weird or wrong. So like when we actually want to make this work for real.
So this is the broken one.
Yep.
But what I'm saying is like when you had the working version just a moment ago, you didn't comment out the other catch error.
Right.
Oh.
Which didn't need to be commented out. But
Oh, actually, that's a good point. Should we?
no,
Do
I
we
mean
need
it just never errored.
Yeah. It
No, I
never-
mean we've been saying you comment out one, uncomment the other. Is it just uncomment that line? Do we leave the other one there because
Well, then you're not catching the error.
That's a different
You're
set
catching-
of confusions.
Yeah.
you're catching different errors, which you might need to do?
I wonder if you leave them both commented out to start with, and you say like the story is like you
Where's the right
uncomment.
place to catch
Where's the
this
right
error?
place? Yeah, and you can even pose the question to the class. You know, is there any difference between these two things?
Right.
Right.
I like where Jack's going with this. I think we've ended up in a pretty good place here. By the way, all of this is just more motivation for updating the instructor file.
Yeah.
Going, here is how to teach this, homeboy.
I'm leaning toward making this more complex and making there a reason to catch errors on 935.
I think that's another step.
Well, I want to get this where we like it.
Okay.
And similar to where you were going, now that Paul's broken the seal on adding more stuff to the observable up on line 26, I think there's more stuff that we could do. Because by this point in the class, we have introduced them to observables, like the 300 section introduces them to observables, introduces to additional operators, possibly more than one operator, map, tap, etc. So making the fetch employees function do a little bit more stuff is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't want to go there yet though until we've actually settled how we want to do this part, because this is the crux of the
Well,
exam.
and right now, the goal is actually to, we've already surpassed the minimum bar needed, which was parity with what we could teach in the previous idea.
Right.
And the whole idea of this pass is not to go and make the end all be all version of
Yeah,
this
I don't
stuff.
want to
Okay.
gold plate this.
That's fair.
Also, I can't handle the commas at the beginning of the lines, even the commented out ones.
So do we just
I
want
was
to like
gonna
leave
ask-
the commas out and developers have to manually, or instructors have to manually add them?
I was going to ask if it's too big of a can of worms right now to talk about adding trailing commas.
Yeah, that
Trailing commas for the win.
no.
You're against trailing
Yeah.
You're
commas
against
too.
trailing commas?
Are you
Yeah.
against trailing commas, or are you
I'm very
against
much not
making them like okay, just not mandating them?
Well, because then everyone's going to start adding them if we do that.
Well, on
Well, yeah,
projects that I've
you
worked
mandate
with,
it one way or the other. It's
Yeah,
not
definitely.
either optional.
That is a whole different conversation, but I can tell you they're wonderful. I come from programming languages where that's just kind of built in as an assumption, and it makes diffs so much nicer.
Yeah.
So there are,
It also
you know
lets
the
you do
arguments,
this,
but if
yeah.
you haven't
It
lived
makes-
with it for a while,
It makes merges a lot nicer because you won't get you won't get merge conflicts when you add a comma or move a line around.
I'm
I
sure
mean, you
Paul-
guys could beat me down on
yeah,
it.
Paul knows all of these things, but unless you've lived with it for a while and really, really kind of felt it in your bones, you're not going to be good.
Yeah.
I don't know. After losing the $ fight last week, I kind of want to have this one out.
Did anybody really win that one though?
I think we all lost the $sign
Yeah.
fight.
No, I mean, I could be beat down pretty easily, though. I would love to hear Kyle's thoughts, because he'll come in with like some wild, out of the blue idea about that.
Well,
like,
the
huh,
danger
okay,
there is
yeah.
that then we'll end up with the leading comma syntax, which some people actually like.
Yeah.
I used to use leading commas, and it was just a pain. Like trailing commas was much easier to deal with than leading commas.
Yeah.
Because then you have things like for people who don't like the first line not indented, you start having fights over why is there now a space or two spaces on the first line, because it needs to line up with everything else
Yeah.
that has a comma in front of it.
Yeah, and
You know.
that's why I think we've finally gone to we only fight about how our tooling is going to format things, and then we never fight about how it's formatted
Right.
again.
Yeah.
Right.
Does Prettier have a switch for that?
For trailing commas?
For which?
What's his default?
For trailing?
Yeah,
I thought
It's on.
I don't know.
because like right here, I'm pretty sure we're using the default,
If
and it
you might
gets rid of
be.
them.
I don't know. I know we're using it on another project or two other projects where we have trailing commas, but it might be a switch we had to turn on.
Yeah, because I think that was like the biggest motivation for using Prettier was to also not have those conversations in the first place as well.
We
Which
just
is like
use their default.
It's not working.
I mean, it has worked very well on many a project for me.
Yeah, I
No.
think we are having these questions less.
That's probably true.
I think it's definitely reduced them, which is good.
And we're dealing with kind of an unusual situation here because we are trying to format code so that it's eminently malleable in class, but it's so clear what the change needs to be. And that's a much different situation than
Yeah.
formatting code for production projects.
Yep.
And so,
Mhm.
just another contextual reminder for all 5 of our viewers is
We love you, by the way.
We gained a few.
actually I think Lance just watched the video twice.
Lance needs to get out more.
So the reason like we're so pedantic over these little bitty things is that we have actually found that we have become accidentally responsible for like how companies take on general code practices. And so we take a very serious turn when it comes to what is the right answer here, because we don't want to accidentally send someone down the wrong path. If one of these examples are looked at out of context and we have like a bad thing in there for the purpose of instruction, if the person looking at it doesn't know that, then they're taking this bad thing and then now taking that into their internal practices. So
There was a comment that I saw, I guess it was last week, from a person that I greatly respect and admire, Bob Martin, Uncle Bob. It was just a tweet from him that said, any argument about code quality that lasts more than 5 minutes is not about code quality. And I get his point, but we had literally just finished one of these when I saw that comment. I'm like, it's not always true. I like and respect everybody in this room a lot. I'm not arguing because arguing is fun or because I don't like anybody or don't respect anybody here. I'm arguing about things because of exactly what you just said. We know that we're going to have an outsized effect with what we do, and it really matters the decisions we make around things like naming and formatting and whether you use trailing commas or not. Because whether people realize it or not, this stuff is going to get cargo culted into other organizations.
Yeah.
We will actually influence a generation of programmers, whether we meant to or not. And so this stuff really matters.
I think it's interesting because, like, I've recently had this experience where we were talking to a developer, and we were having a similar kind of conversation about, you know, how you write code, and his kind of objection to what we were doing and what we were trying to tell him about how we write code came more from a place of he was having trouble understanding just in general, and he was kind of blaming those discussions as opposed to.
It's very easy to latch on to something like that
and say that's the reason. Like those trailing commas, if we just didn't have those, then our code would be so much better, and I could understand it. Not realizing that wasn't the problem.
Yeah, it's like a smaller, more personal form of bike shedding.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand all of this stuff, and I don't even understand the fact that I don't understand it.
Right.
So I'm going to focus on where the commas are.
Right.
Because that is the thing I can hold in my head.
So I think the reason that these conversations are different is that there's a very high level of understanding going on, and we're talking about these, like, none of us think that, like, trailing commas, like, you, like, even you who's against it, you acknowledge that it's a reasonable approach to take. And so we can then come at the conversation as okay, well, what is the trade-offs in each of these situations?
The only reason I care about it in this particular case is because I want to make it really easy for the instructor, who is sometimes me, but certainly not always, to comment out one line and uncomment the other without having to like do any fiddly bits with the code. But unfortunately, the only way to do that and keep our automatic formatting in place is to lead off with commas on 27 and 34. And I think that's actually worse than forcing the instructor to put the commas in place.
Yeah, I agree. I would rather have it like this.
So I think what's most defensible about that is that we are not embedding the wrong thing in the form of a comment that you could turn on and then it would work in the bad formatted state. And in fact, if they wanted to, like, you would actually get a compilation error. So like it would force someone using this out of context to put it into a working state.
I guess in that same spirit of like somebody who's looking at this out of context, do we want to put comments as to like which one of these is the right way? Which I guess kind of goes against what I was saying earlier about having a story to tell.
I think a comment up around line 23, it's like, where should the catch error be in this example to properly recover from like an error? However we want to say it, but a comment that basically leads someone to go, oh, I see both of these, which one is correct?
Yeah.
And then, the advanced version of that story is kind of where John was going, which is like, actually, both of these are correct depending on what you're actually trying to accomplish. We might need to jazz up the poll employees example a little bit to cause some other kind of error to happen. I don't know if we want to go down that road, but it's not actually wrong to have both of these catch errors in place. But if what you're trying to do is recover from going offline or hitting a bad server or whatever, 27 is the one you're going to care about.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm happy enough with this formatting. I think this works. A comment up around line 23-ish that's essentially where should the catch error be to recover from an HTTP error.
And why? Are we also going to be adding this to some instructor notes as well? Because A, I'm forgetful. And B, if we are bringing in a new instructor, they may not understand
Dave,
this example.
The way you phrase that, I know it doesn't sound like it to you, but that was actually you volunteering to update the instructor notes.
Okay. All right. This time I'll write it down because I think I volunteered for something last week and I didn't write it down. So
we should write it down when we volunteer David for things. That seems more productive.
Yeah, that should happen too. So you keep me honest.
Here for a few things that time you weren't here.
Yeah.
And so with that, So stuff 706.
Throw a blank line under that because it's not just applying to the fetch employees.
Yeah.
Okay.
fair.
And ship it.
Well, I do have one question about this. So is it recovered gracefully, period, or recovered gracefully from an HTTP error? Do we want to be that specific or leave it off?
I think we want to be that specific, but probably not phrase it the way I did and the way you did, which is an HTTP error.
From a network error?
Yeah, maybe that. Like, well, how about where should the catch error be placed if the I mean, what we're basically saying is if something causes the request to fail.
Yeah, if the request fails.
But then we're kind of giving the game away because the HTTP GET on line 27 is the request.
I don't think you're giving it. I think you're looking at it from a high level of knowledge and saying, oh, well, then it's obvious. And it's really not.
I have nothing but respect for our students and how smart they are. So
Okay.
can't speak for everybody else in the room.
Well, I think this generic question.
Your point is exactly right.
I think this generic question just allows all the instructors to take this in whichever direction they're most comfortable to get through the content.
Okay.
Ship it.